Hey everyone, welcome to another recording session of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today on my right, Amanda Suffolcool, Eye on the Target Radio. Below her, Rob Morse of Self-Defense Gun Stories of the Slow Facts blog, and about 1 million places on the internet you can pick up his contact. And below me is John Richardson, Only Guns and Money blog. That's going to be your team for today. And we'll get going here in just a second. I want to make sure my social media is all connected up here. If you are watching us live on YouTube or on Facebook, go ahead and connect with the Polite Society podcast. If you're on those pages, we'll get your comments and put them on the air. We'll discuss them as we're live. If you're anywhere else and you comment and you don't see your comment show up, go over to those pages and try again. My software only picks up comments from Polite Society podcast pages. So, it will pick up from others, but I get most traffic from those places. So let's go ahead and get started here. If everybody's ready. Let's see here. Here we go. Masada Ayub in 5, 4, 3.
Hey gang, this is Masada Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. And I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. We're recording this one on Monday, July the 10th, 2023. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Rob Morse, and on tonight's show, we'll talk about an owner of a shooting range in Vermont. He was ordered to be arrested and held in jail until his range is destroyed.
I'm John Richardson, and we'll talk about St. Benitez asking California why the owner of a gun needs another background check for ammo.
And I'm Amanda Suffolcool, and in one of our defensive gun uses, an armed citizen in Israel stopped a terrorist attack. So climb aboard.
Strap in.
And hang on.
Episode 668 of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast starts right now. All right, it's Monday night. It's just after 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. in the Central Time Zone, the only time zone that matters. So it's time for me to ask Rob Morse, what's been up with you since the last time you've been on Polite Society, man?
I was vacationing out of the country. I got back and took my basic pistol instructor renewal class. That was a great chance to remember my command voice for range commands. John, how about you?
Well, I spent the weekend working the Grassroots North Carolina booth at the local Asheville Gun Show. I was able to get volunteers to assist on both days. We signed up a few members, told the story of the repeal of the pistol purchase permit, and why constitutional carry failed for now in North Carolina. Didn't buy any guns, did get a good buy and some reloading ammo, and I'm not sure if I mentioned that I have now paid my deposit for my hunt in Africa.
Wow.
So Amanda?
Oh, I'm so
And
excited for you.
my brother-in-law is going to go with me. So
Look at you.
we're good. Yeah.
That is
Amanda,
good.
what's
I'm
up?
watching. Have you been watching Scott? Scott from the Gun Runner. Scott, darn, his name has escaped me. He is in Africa right now on a safari, and the photos are amazing. And so we just keep watching him go. And I saw him. I saw the stuff, and I was like, that's going to be John real soon. for me, I am starting to put together my travel schedule for the next few weeks. I'm in Florida to showcase to a couple of my friends WAFT, the Western Orlando Firearms Training Center, then to Nashville, Tennessee with the DC Project to talk about red flag laws, or I guess talk against red flag laws, and then planning the Rick Ector's Ladies Shoot event in Detroit with all the volunteer instructors. So pretty full schedule coming up. So there you go. Paul, what about you? What are you and Susan up to?
Well, I got reminded on Saturday that a lot of states have one gun a month limits. Well, some states, not a lot, but there are some states that have one gun a month limits. And I'm falling behind. I need to catch up. So I've started doing a little bit of research. I'm going to be going out and doing some looking, and I think it's time to add to the Lathrop family arsenal. So that's what I've been doing yesterday and today. Still doing a lot of planning for GRPC, a little bit of planning for AmCon. We've got a conference call for that coming up the middle of this week. And I as well as Rob are going to be going the end of the month down up to Detroit to help out Rick Ector there with the women's shooting weekend. And I'm getting really pumped up for that one. I'm cannot wait for that thing to roll around. And let me see here. I want to get some check-ins here real briefly. Dana, who's going to be there this come in the end of the month, I think, and this is also the guy that writes our show notes, says hello from the Mitten. And Carrie Ann, who is one of our staff members that is occasionally on with us, Sisters in Arms, a Firearm Story, that's Carrie Ann Auclair. She says hello all. Guys, I also should mention as I'm talking about it that as I get a calendar up here, 3 weeks from today, there will not be a Polite Society podcast. We are going to be, Susan and I are going to be returning from Detroit that day. The plan is to do it all the way back in one shot. We're driving out there in one shot. The plan is to drive back in one shot. And so we may be getting home about the time the show is scheduled to go live, and this does take at least several hours of preparation, so I won't be able to do a show that night. Let's see here. That's pretty much all that's been going on with me. I do want to mention Self-Defense Radio Network, SDRN.us, all your favorite pro-gun podcasts in one place. There is an issue with the website right now. Believe me, I'm working on it. There's an issue with GoDaddy, who's our website provider, that I need to get corrected. And I spent a good deal of today working on that. The websites for Polite Society, AmCon, for Self-Defense Radio Network, and for ButDidTheyDie.com are all down. Working on getting that restored. That about does it. And Rob, I got to say, man, I've been looking at some of those pictures you posted from when you were underwater a week and a half ago. And man, I got to say, I'm jealous. Part of the getting rid of this was I'm ready to go back down to the Virgin Islands and go snorkeling. And part of the reason I got rid of the mustache and goatee is really hard to snorkel if you've got a full mustache. You got to get Vaseline, and it's got to be on there just perfectly, and still water will get up into your mask, and salt water in the eyes is never a good thing. So, all right, I think that does it. We're going to go ahead and take our first break. When we come back, we've got news, including about, as we teased earlier, about St. Benitez moving forward on one of the gun lawsuits on his desk, and a Vermont. This one will get your blood boiling. A Vermont range owner is in jail, and we'll get to that one later. I need my blood pressure medication. I'll see if I can get it while we're on break. right back right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Massad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Gibbons, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tuller, and led by network president Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
All right, we are back. This is the news segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Before we get going on news, I want to get just a couple of real quick comments that came in while we were on break. Charlie Cook, good evening, friends. I'm back in occupied territory, heading back to America-ish tomorrow, free America-ish tomorrow. And 500 Magnum says, Florida became number 27. As always, the anti-gunners were losing their mind, and yet again, they're wrong. No blood in the streets. Yes, no news is, in relation to that, no news is good news. And he always knew it would be that way. Let's go ahead and get started. Rob, I think you put this first one in show notes. You want to read it, and I'll take the second one?
I'd love to. We've been waiting this. We wondered why we didn't hear some movement about this case coming out of a California court for a long time. Judge Roger Benitez issued an order. The case deals with California's strange ammunition laws. The case had been to the Ninth Circuit Court and then returned back to the trial judge after the Bruin ruling a year ago. Recently, the judge asked for testimony on a preliminary injunction and for submission of evidence on the case so that it would be ready to try on the same day. That testimony is scheduled for, let's count, next Monday. That's from a case that's taken years, so this request is very sudden. The state has to prove that there were ammunition restrictions that required a background check before each ammunition purchase when the Second Amendment was written. That's going to be a hard sell. Now, it's going to be interesting for the state to show how a gun owner who's already got guns and ammunition, both of which require a background check, somehow requires yet another background check for more ammunition. So why am I'm not dangerous if I own 500 rounds, but I'm dangerous if I buy another 25? John, does this make any sense to you?
No. I mean, I remember the days when ammo sellers actually had to keep a bound book on all ammo sales. That went away in 1986. And even Ted Kennedy, no friend of gun owners, thought that was a reasonable thing to do. Get rid of the bound book. The guy who shared the booth with me this weekend sometimes bought ammo by the pallet load.
Whoa.
He usually buys at least by the case. So when he moved to North Carolina, he needed a U-Haul just for his ammo.
Wow.
Sorry.
Well,
Wow.
and to speaking as a former truck driver, the gross weight vehicle rating on those U-Hauls, you cannot. It's designed to hold household stuff, which has got a lot of air in it. Not necessarily designed to hold ammo, which doesn't have a lot of air in it. It's very dense. I'm betting he exceeded. If he would have been pulled into a scale, he'd have been in trouble.
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
Or if he'd have hit a bump.
Yeah.
We'll just talk tires.
I don't think we're going to have a decision from them. I mean, it's scheduled to be heard on Monday of next week. I don't think we'll have a decision yet because unless he rules from the bench that early afternoon in California, we won't have a decision yet at 5 p.m. Pacific time when we go to air. I would expect him to rule on it. I'm hoping, let me rephrase that, to have him rule on it next week sometime, so I'll be able to talk about it on the bullet, but I don't expect that to be Monday.
Right.
I mean, but each of us can give our opinion. I think, I mean, when you look at the history, text, and tradition in Bruin at 1791, there was nothing in there that said we had to limit the lead purchase or the primer purchase or the flint purchase or the powder purchase right? I mean, it was all none of that. So I think they're going to be hard pressed to explain why there's a need now that wasn't there then. But
Right.
it's different.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. And I do believe that Benitez, Judge Benitez, is going to be one that closely follows the
Bruin.
the Bruin. What the word I'm trying to say is a legal term, but
Well-
dicta. The dicta in Bruin.
Well, now, actually, can I? Okay, good. Let's get it deep into baseball here. I think it's actually Heller, because Heller was the ban, and this is a ban on ammo. It's not a permitting issue; it's a ban. So that would be Heller. He said, repeating himself. Did I repeat myself? Repeating himself.
No, so how so? What do you? I know, understand. Can you please slow down, come back, circle around, and explain this to me in short words so I get it?
Do you know, I want you guys to know that Amanda calls me slow talking Rob, so I can never quite tell when she's teasing me when she asks me a question. Amanda, the Heller case was about a ban on firearms in Washington, D.C. Bruin was about who could be issued permits in New York State. The judges said these are similar cases in the importance that we give to the Second Amendment. It's a fundamental right. But the difference is the rules about when the government acquires a burden. And in Heller, they said, if it looks like a ban and it touches the Second Amendment, then the burden falls on the government to show that there were similar regulations. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. No, if there's a ban done. All they have to say is, if this is commonly used by ordinary citizens for lawful purposes, it's on the face of it unconstitutional. My bad.
I want to get a couple comments in here. George Geller says they didn't sell cartridges in 1792, and California has no restrictions on components, only on cartridges. And he followed up with just stating the facts, not saying I like it. George, that's what the state is going to argue. I would bet money that's what the state is going to argue. However, I think they're going to fall flat on their face because they're and I'm going back to the Bruin decision here. The Bruin decision is not, you got to go back to 1791 for what the rules were back then, what the laws were back then. And back then, you could have any amount of anything that served a fire or a weapon. Period.
Including cannons.
Yes.
George, the argument has been, well, but wait, there were powder houses. There were restrictions on how much powder you could possess. Those were essentially building codes. They were worried about fire. Remember, a lot of things were made out of wood in those days. Brick was harder to find. And the notion of municipal water systems and fire trucks, No, not yet. That it's on the horizon, but it doesn't really exist the way we have it now.
Fire
But I
trucks
would
wouldn't
like
come
to-
along until after
Right.
real fire trucks wouldn't come along until after the Civil War. They had some before the Civil War, horse-drawn carriages, but real fire trucks wouldn't
What I
come
would-
along.
But even if they said going back to cartridges, you're still going back to the Civil War, maybe a little bit earlier. You had the Henry rifle.
1808. 1808 was the
1808.
first cartridge.
So
So
if you had no restrictions in 1808, I just certainly didn't have it after that in the wild, wild west. I mean, you could go into any store and buy ammo.
Absolutely. Even the women's department at Sears, I think, well, at least their catalog.
you could send the kids to buy
Yeah.
ammo.
Yeah, absolutely.
You wait.
Ask her how she knows.
Bruin is going to tear down the firearms age limit. It is going
I
to
hope.
slowly erode till it's gone.
You know, and I was listening to somebody, I believe it was Rob, was playing in my ears. Back in the Civil War, back in the Revolutionary War, all the way up until, honestly, World War I, 15, 16-year-olds were fighting in our wars. If you were old enough to stand up, hold a firearm, and fire it effectively, you were part of the militia.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Ohio's revised code, modified as late as 1999, it says from 17 to 67 is the age limit for every able-bodied person to be in as part of the unofficial militia. If they're not covered by the official militia, they are a portion of the unofficial militia as part of the state. So 17 to 67.
So I want to make sure I heard that correctly. Every able-bodied person, not every able-bodied male, every able-bodied person in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
But 17 is the thing. And people are like, oh, it's an old law. No, it was modified in 1999. So those of us, there's some of us who have socks that old. But I'm just saying.
Among other articles of clothing, but we'll leave that there. 500 Magnum says, nothing would bring me greater joy than watching the NFA fall. I would go back and have it. I haven't had a drink since for 2.5 years under doctor's advice. I would break my own rule. I would have a celebratory drink if the NFA actually fell in my lifetime. I believe there's greater than a 50-50 shot of it.
I had a conversation over breakfast with Tom King, the president of the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, specifically about the NFA and the Bruin decision. And his words are, he doesn't necessarily think that that society is ready for the NFA to fall. So what he thinks is that they will peel out piece by piece by piece. So the NFA stands, but it is a completely empty box with nothing inside it. So that the anti-gun people still say we have the 1934 Gun Control Act. We all know that there's just nothing in it.
Your fan club is chiming in, Amanda. George says, tip of the day, never start an argument with Amanda.
I'll tell you if I don't know something, and I'll tell you if I look up something. But
all right, let's go ahead and let's go to our next story. This one is from Lee Williams, the SAF's investigative reporter. A Vermont environmental court judge has ordered that shooting range owner Daniel Banyai be arrested and held in state prison until he or the town he's been feuding with for years over zoning issues, Paulette, Vermont, population 1386, destroy all the structures on his private range. This week, Judge Thomas Durkin of the Environmental Division of Vermont's Superior Court issued a rarely seen writ of mitimus, a type of arrest warrant to all law enforcement officers in the state. By the authority of the state of Vermont, any sheriff or constable in this state is directed to arrest Daniel Banyai and remit him to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections to be thereafter confined until he or the town causes the subject property to be brought into compliance with the March 5th, 2021 order as described in the February 8th, 2023 contempt order to the court's satisfaction, Judge Durkin wrote. As of last Thursday night, Banyai was still at home waiting to be arrested. Please help me, he said in a text. I'm fighting all alone. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this this story link and I'm going to go ahead and put it up. It should go out to Facebook and YouTube if anybody wants to look this story up. I've not seen any updates to this story since Saturday. I got two hands here. John, go.
Lee Williams reported this morning it included pictures that Banyai tore down the range structures because he was concerned about the care of his farm animals. He has an organic farm if he were in prison. The judge, by the way, was a one-time law clerk of current U.S. Senator Peter Welch of Vermont. In other words, he's connected. And I would have to say that Durkin is an example why judges should be elected and not appointed.
Oh, yeah. Amanda, you had your hand up, too.
Yes. So the interesting part is because he runs an organic farm. So he's got holistic animals and does it on an organic basis. He couldn't find somebody to take care of the animals. The other piece is that if you read some of the stuff that Banyai said and the statements that he made with his lawyer, even though he's tearing down his range, he believes that he had the permits issued to allow him to do this. And so they're now negating those permits. So all of us, keep your fingers crossed. And if he's still looking for legal money, send some. Because I think that he could own that little town if they did indeed issue the permits and then they decided that the permits they issued were not good enough. And so this is a guy who's really fighting for all of our rights and for government overreach and for little towns to create in effect, a town version of an HOA where you have no control over it. And your only option is to roll over or be squeezed or be rolled over.
I think he should sue as a violation of civil rights under color of law in federal court.
Yeah.
Because if he wins, they pay.
And they pay attorney's fees, yes.
Yes.
I would love to see him.
Well, didn't this town complain to their legislators? And then the legislators said, yeah, you can't train a militia and terrorists on your range. And then the city said, see, yes, we need to tear all this down. So this was a long-standing feud. And the guy has to go, does this law apply to anybody else but me? Interesting.
I honestly believe that law was written for one person in Vermont, and this was political favor being called in on political favor, and then this little town got what they wanted. I hope that he wins and gets what he wants, which is the exact one other thing that's been burning me up. I've in passing, in joking, mentioned Bud Light on the show before, and their issues. I sincerely hope this little town does a Ben and Jerry's, and this guy ends up with title to the town, and they have to pay him rent. Ben and Jerry's came out just before July 4th and said, we need to give back all lands that were stolen from the Native Americans. Well, Ben and Jerry's headquarters, as well as all their stores, are on former Native American land. And there's a chief of the tribe there in that area says, okay, we're willing to talk. We'll take it off your hands. So, Let me get this one in from George.
Okay, Horshack.
I like that it's an environmental court. Will they come after gas stoves yet? They can have my gas stove when they take it from my cold, dead hands. I'm telling you, because I will starve to death without it. I'm not a microwave cook. I'm not a anything like that. When I eat, it comes off the stove, and that is what happened. That's how Susan has lost. We started making everything at home. That's how Susan has lost over 70 pounds. I've lost 50 just by eating healthier and eating our own homemade food rather than going out all the time. We saved a ton of money, too. John, let's go ahead and this next story is good news. Let's get to that one.
Americans celebrated their Second Amendment rights over 1 million times in June, the 47th straight month of record-setting gun sales. According to the FBI, background checks for gun purchases passed 1 million last month. The National Shooting Sports Foundation, the industry representative, said that of 2,152,187 background checks last month, 1,110,696 were likely for gun purchases and transfers, the rest being for carry and other security permits. Quote, June marks the 47th month in a row that has exceeded 1 million adjusted background checks in a single month.
I'm going to ask the same question that I asked at when we did the Bullet this past weekend on Saturday night. John, I'm going to start with you. Is this the new norm? This is 1 month shy of 4 years. Is this the new norm, or are we going to slip back down under 1 million when a Republican president takes over and the gun rights don't look like they're in jeopardy?
I think it is the new norm because you have many people who were not previously gun owners, especially women and minorities, who have now purchased their first gun. And let's say they purchased a small or larger handgun. Now they want a carry gun. Now they may decide that, well, for the defense of the home, they may want to go to a shotgun or an AR-15. They may have decided, well, we have now seen that it is safe to have a firearm. We need to train our kids, so we're going to get a Ruger 10/22.
All right. Rob, your thoughts, dude?
Right. The media sells fear. A lot of the time, they would like to tell us, average white bread conservatives, that we're evil. Well, we don't feel that way, but I think what that does is spread fear of us in the rest of society. Oddly enough, they're then telling many minorities, many of them former liberals, that they should go get a gun so that I won't, to stop me if I break into their home. The media's been working against itself for a long time. Violence is localized. Violence is only really in our Democrat-controlled failed cities. If the media would quit lying, I bet a lot of gun ownership growth might actually be reduced. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
All right. Amanda, you answered this once on Saturday, but your turn again.
I got a whole new spin now, Paul. I've thought about this a little bit more.
Oh, boy.
Everything I said on Saturday stands, but in addition, when I was doing my show on Sunday, we were looking at gun manufacturers and how many guns are manufactured. And do you know that it's like 7.75 million guns in the top 5 manufacturers within the United States, the top 5. And a lot of the gun companies that you and I know are not in the top 25. So I went looking for gun companies of guns I specifically own, and they weren't in that top 25. So I don't know how many gun manufacturers there are, but if you look at it and say, well, we're talking about $1 million a month, and 7.75 million is in just the top 5 manufacturers, yeah, we're on a trend that's just it's the gift that keeps on giving.
I'm halfway wondering, expanding on what John inferred, I'm halfway wondering if maybe a lot of these 1 million a month new gun owners, or let's say only half of them are new gun owners, the other are half that are trying to get to the 1 gun a month club. Let's say if only half of those are new gun owners, are they maybe lower income people and getting what they can afford, and then they're going to trade up or get a gun in addition to? Maybe they started off with a Sky Arms 9mm, and they want to go to a Beretta or a Glock or a Smith & Wesson, whatever. That's kind of where I think it might continue on with. We're at a new norm.
Quantities
Well, I will say.
I'm sorry, Don. Go ahead, and then I got a point.
Well, the one thing I was going to say is I had a nice chat with an African-American couple at the gun show this weekend, husband and wife, and she had just bought a Winchester shotgun with an extended tube. I'm assuming by what she had, it was for home defense. They were looking for other stuff, so I saw Hispanics, I saw blacks, might have seen some Asians. I saw hippies, I saw people with face tattoos, I saw people, mountaineers, I saw everything at the gun show. It's Asheville.
That's the population of Asheville, is just about everybody. It's a melting pot.
It's a melting pot.
But there is something different. There's something called a social tipping point theory that says, no, we don't need a color TV. No, we don't. Dad, do you know that the people next door have a color TV? All right, we can get it. We don't need a microwave, but the neighbor, yeah, okay, we'll get a microwave. Do you know how cheap flat screens are? Okay, we'll go to flat screen. Dad, why do we still have a landline? Okay, we'll get rid of that. Everybody has a cell phone now. So change is gradual at first, and then it reaches a tipping point, and things become normalized. For the, male, pale, and stale? Was that you, Amanda, who quoted that? The gun culture 1.0? That market's been saturated. But amongst young, urban, black women, no, I don't think we've reached saturation yet. That curve is still climbing. And okay, we're going to see more Asians. We're going to see more Hispanics. Once that picture starts to pour, a lot of new guns are coming out.
Tying this into what's happening in about 2.5 weeks, we're helping a lot of women in Detroit get over their fear of their first firearm purchase. At least I did last year. Saturday last year at the Recoil range, which is the range I was at, was extremely busy. Huge strip mall. They had ladies lined up halfway down this strip mall to get into this shooting event. And I'm very much looking forward to doing it again and normalizing it for a lot more minority females.
Okay,
and helping
to go
Rob's tipping.
To go back into your comment about people budget conscious for their first gun. In the top 25, High Point was in there, as was Sky.
Oh, wow.
Sky was pretty high. I mean, it's tracking on the heels of Glock. I think that Sky was like $500,000 and Glock was not quite 600,000. I mean, so it's within reach, touch point kind of thing. The part that really amazed me was that, the Heritage and Heritage Rough Riders, the 22 revolvers, that is one of the really kind of they sell more of those than anything. It's right in there with High Point, or I'm sorry, with Sky and with the Glocks, right in that 500,000 mark. And it's owned by Taurus. And so when you put that with Taurus and you track those together, it makes Taurus like number 3 or number 4 in popularity above Glock. Believe it or not.
Yeah. One thing I might add, especially for minority women, if we look at what the media calls mass shootings in the last few days in Baltimore, Philadelphia, Fort Worth, look at where they happened. They happened in minority communities. The shooters, from what we understand, were also minorities. And unfortunately, there's a lot of violence within minority communities, and mama bears want to protect their cubs.
Oh yeah,
and they should. The one in Baltimore, they're saying now that they have shell casings for multiple guns. It was more than you could count on both hands. They said in the multiples of guns, something like that. So that doesn't sound. I mean, mass shooting. That sounds like it was a street war.
Yeah, and here's my thought to that. I'm thinking not all of those were from the same shooter. I'm thinking that was...
No, correct.
Yeah.
No, she's describing the number of shooters, not the number of shots.
Right.
Correct. Yes.
Dana commented here a few minutes ago about the number of stories on violent crime goes down. The number won't go, meaning the number of say, we won't dip below the 1 million a month until the number of stories on violent crime goes down. And I honestly think that may be, I think Dana's right. And I mentioned this on Saturday from my time in television in the 90s, the late 80s and into the mid 90s. I worked in television at a local station. And if it bleeds, it leads is absolutely positively true and still true today. Mm-hmm. They need ratings. They need people in front of the TV. And so they're not going to give up their stories on violent crime. It will always lead. It'll always be right out front where they're going to get the most viewers. So
it's not really a lead, though. It's a teaser, and then they wait till the end.
Yeah.
Paul, and let's be clear. It's not that the blood is particularly important. The media sells fear and outrage.
Yes.
We'll pay attention to things that... Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask. Let me ask you guys, because I know our local station always does it. They refer the number of mass shootings from the Gun Violence Archive.
Yes.
They keep referring to it. And it's a local station, not... I mean, it's an ABC affiliate, but they always keep going back to that, and we know their numbers are wrong.
So,
did you see that in Ohio?
Have you written to them?
A complaint, yeah.
Because here's the thing: every time I hear a story like that, I go right then and find an email, and I send them an email about that with the correct information. And so because they did a thing where somebody it was overseas, I think it was overseas, had used a baseball bat, had used their car, had used a gun, had used a machete. I don't know. It was like this melee of different things that they used something until somebody took it away from them, and then they grabbed something else, and they'd murdered multiple people, and they called them the gunmen. And in the quantity of people that were hurt, dead, maimed, injured, the shot was like 2%, or I'm sorry, 20% were shot compared to the other things. And it was like, why don't you just call them the murderer, or the killer, or the attacker, or the monster, instead of calling them the gunman? Because why aren't you calling them the axeman, or and I went into this, and the next story that came out, the lead, the next hour, they had changed their demeanor. They had changed their lead story. They had rewritten it to change the verbiage. So sometimes you can reach them, but you have to reach them information, not just with outrage. Though I'm sure you're really
Right.
good with information, not just outrage. You know.
Right. I ran, and then I get down to reasonable.
Start with reasonable, see where you go.
Dana says media across the country, from locals to Fox, CNN, etc., use gun violence archive. That's unfortunate. And the thing is,
But
if you
but
follow
that's
gun
because
violence,
that's because if we say that there were 30 school children killed in the previous 12 months in a mass murder at school, that doesn't sound bad enough. I need to talk about hundreds or thousands of people in mass shootings. That's Chicago every weekend.
Now see, I'm going to cut them a different set of slack. I just think they're lazy, and somebody found that website, and then they all found that website, and so
Okay, maybe.
I don't attribute it to evilness. There's probably an agenda, but I just think it's get off the sofa, get off your keister, look it up.
I think it's both. I mean, if you look at CBS Sunday Morning, every Sunday now, they will say how many people died in gun violence, and they always quote the gun violence archive. They run a separate little thing right after they run who was famous that died this week.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think once they find their shtick, then now you got it. But
yeah,
all right, we need to get moving here because we're flirting with top of the hour here soon. Rob, let's talk about your former state.
As a California refugee, I notice when California politics takes another turn to the weird. Political observers question whether California's Governor Gavin Newsom is considering a presidential bid tomorrow or later. The Democrats from the U.S.'s largest state is pitching a 28th Amendment. It would overturn our Second Amendment. On Monday, Newsom's Political Action Committee began running ads like this. Hey, it's Gavin Newsom. If you believe it's time for a constitutional amendment on guns, I have some news for you. The 28th Amendment will raise the minimum age to buy a firearm, mandate universal background checks, institute a purchase waiting period for guns, and ban civilian purchase of assault weapons. Getting this done will require a national movement, and that starts with making all of our voices heard. Sign my petition.
Yeah.
By the way, specific details on the proposal aren't available at his website. Vaporware. Amanda, John, Paul.
Sign my petition. Give me a donation, and all of a sudden, right now, because then I'll have your name. But there's all that. But the other part is the Democrats who are seeing him say that are going, wait. In order to do that, we would have to have, and there's this group of people who are trying to do a constitutional convention or whatever that convention of the states is. And they're like, do not open that box, because if you open the box, the conservatives may jump in and pull out everything that they want, and you may not like it. So they're saying don't open the box. The conservatives are saying don't open the box, but everybody's prepared that if they open the box, it could get real interesting.
Well, and I want to say to Gavin Newsom, there is, and there has been for 232 years, an amendment in the Constitution relating to guns. It's the second one. We've had the Second Amendment for 232 years, and going back to 1791, it's just fine the way it is. We don't need it improved. We need it to be followed.
I think Rob was right. What Newsom is or Amanda, that Newsom is trying to build a mailing list. He wants to run for president. He's hoping that Joe Biden flames out because nobody really wants Kamala, including most Democrats, I think. And once he's got the money, and he would then tap into your Bloomberg / Washington State billionaires / Soros billions to fund his campaign through, super PACs that he is unaffiliated with. Right? No coordination. Mm-hmm. Wink, wink.
Yeah. Dana says, balanced budget, congressional term limits, such are on the Convention of the States wish list. I as well think Convention of the States may be a bad thing, simply because, as written, the Second Amendment is just fine, and we would open the Constitution up to everything else that could come through, and I do not like the idea of, they could insert this or that or the other into the Constitution, which is just done just fine on its own. We can win through the court system, and we're winning through the court system. I don't think a Convention of the States, really myself, is the way to go. And to be honest, I agree with both Rob and Amanda. This is a pure presidential run. That's all this is. There's slightly less than a 0% chance he gets this. In order to get a constitutional amendment through, the 28th Amendment, what he wants through, he would need to get 2/3 of both the Senate and the House to pass it. Absolutely zero chance. And then 3/4 of the states, more than half of which already have permitless carry, would need to climb on board, and those states would need to adopt it. So,
right.
Yeah, no chance at all. This is simply him wanting to push Joe out of the way.
And he may be successful at that. That's really going to be, if I were Kamala at this point, I would be very cautious that that she doesn't slip or trip or fall or something, because there's just it's a Jenga little stack right there, and one slip and people are going everywhere.
Hey, we're just barely over 6 months from the very first contests in the presidential race for 2024. The Iowa and New Hampshire are in February. Traditionally, they're in February of the election year. So we're just about 6 months away from that now, just barely over. If somebody's going to step in on the Democrat side, the time is now to do it.
Watch the noise.
Let's see here. Let's go to our next one. Amanda, I'm going to rescue you because you don't like being one-eyed while you read. Washington law enforcement report proves gun control is a total failure. This is a press release from the folks at the Citizens Committee. A new report released Monday by the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs offers ample evidence that 2 extremist gun control initiatives, along with additional legislation pushed by Democrat lawmakers, has failed miserably and should be repealed, the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms said today. WASPC data released Monday showing 96% increase in homicides since 2019 is damning proof that billionaire-backed gun control measures were, as we predicted, false pie-in-the-sky promises, said CCR KBA Chairman Alan Gottlieb. Passage of Initiative 594 in 2014 and I-1639 in 2018 have accomplished nothing other than to create massive impairments which we believe are unconstitutional for law-abiding Washington citizens. While the billionaires who bankrolled both initiatives were saying these measures would reduce crime, we were telling the people the truth, and that the WASPC report vindicates our arguments. WASPC says last year's 394 murders is the highest number of homicides recorded by the group since 1980. We're now more than a year out of passage on so-called large capacity magazines, which is a pet project of Democrat Attorney General Bob Ferguson, Gottlieb added. Guess what? Murders went up last year by 16.6% over 2021. I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. No big shock. Washington is becoming more of a cesspool after anti-gun legislation goes through. John, you're up for a comment in show notes. What do you think, man?
Well, I have a modest proposal. You know how people are talking about we need to break up California into like 3 states or 6 states or 50 states or whatever, and they're thinking, well, it's just a whole bunch of Democrats. Well, think about Washington. Washington west of the Cascades becomes West Washington. Cascades and east becomes East or Cascadia, Washington. You'd add 2 Republican senators and a bunch of Republican congressmen to balance out the 2 Democrats in West Washington. It would be a win. It'll never happen, but, you know, just need to
I don't know about
that,
never. There are 5 counties in Oregon, if I remember right, that are trying to secede from Oregon and join Idaho because they believe Idaho
Same in eastern Washington, Paul.
Yeah.
But see, if they join another state, the senators don't have heartburn. If they try to create, you split, if the egg splits and now they have twins, the problem is there's 2 more senators. And for them, they're looking at it going, they are 1 of 100 of the most exalted personalities in the country. Why would they dilute it to be 1 of 102 or 1 of 106? So I believe that, and they're the people who get to make that determination. I believe that there are so many big heads and strong wills that it won't happen.
How about we take a look? Let's go back to the 1860s. We were just about to go into a civil war. We were still adding states to the nation. Kansas comes to mind. Texas was in there in that area as well. When you added a free state, or a slave state, you had to add a free state as well. I'm wondering if maybe we don't get a West Washington, and then, oh, by the way, Puerto Rico becomes a state as well.
D.C.,
yeah.
Maybe, if you could convince them. I still think that the 102% theory is the one that's going to hold you back.
Yep.
That it's not going to be the parties, it's going to be those people themselves.
Yeah.
Cut in the campaign contributions.
Yeah, that too.
All right.
Believe me, we're living with an Ohio Senate race. The last one, the primary, was a $70 million race. That was what each of the candidates put in before the PACs and before all the private money came in.
In Ohio. $70 million just for the primary.
Just for the primary.
Yikes. So how much is that seat pay that they are running for? And not $70 million.
160, 170?
Something like that. Yeah, 172, 174, something like that is the number, I think. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and so they're each in good for $10 million, something like that.
All right. Well, let's do this. We're going to step aside to our next to the last break. We're going to go into our DGU segment, and we will get to there's a story out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. There's a story out of Seattle, and there's a story out of Tel Aviv. We'll get to all of those when we come back, right after we hear from the Complete Combatant. Back after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by The Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. Please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off.
All right, we are back. This is the Defensive Gun Use segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The Defensive Gun Use segment is intended as information and entertainment only, not as training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions and not those of any sponsors or other affiliations. John, it looks like you signed up for the first one. Let's talk about Pennsylvania.
Yeah, this comes from Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. At 4 a.m., a woman in her home heard someone banging and breaking windows of her residence. She then retrieved a handgun. She encountered a 52-year-old woman who struck her with what turned out to be a floor squeegee. The resident fired one shot and then ran from her home, whereupon she started banging on her neighbors' doors to get help. According to the Pennsylvania State Police, the intruder told them she had a key and wanted to retrieve her property and had set a time to be there from the owner. 4 a.m., mind you. Troopers had taken the resident into custody and seized her gun. When interviewed a second time by troopers, the intruder recanted her story and admitted she used a blunt object to break out the kitchen window, and the homeowner had not told her of a time to come and retrieve her items. She admitted to swinging the squeegee 2 or 3 times and hit the woman before being shot in the leg. The intruder is being charged with aggravated assault. Paul?
I'm hoping that the defender, the good lady here, gets her gun back. They took her gun. They incarcerated her. They've apparently let her out. Did they let her gun out? And that's and the other, real quickly, while it popped into my head, I want to get to is that's poor police work. 4 a.m. Who in the world is going to agree to meet somebody at 4 a.m.? That sounds absolutely like BS to me from the get-go.
Only if you were going there to get your crack back would it be an acceptable time.
Yeah. Hunter, calling Hunter. What? Okay.
I don't. Well, that's Secret Service. We're gonna leave that one.
Seattle, Washington.
Yeah, let's do Seattle.
Never bring a pitchfork to a sword fight. At least if you know how to use a sword. At 1:20 in the afternoon, police responded to a report of a residential burglary. They found the homeowner holding a samurai sword. He had visible injuries, while a second man had a torso wound. The homeowner can be heard on badge cam footage that the other man was inside his house. The other man had attacked him with a pitchfork. He just arrived home and noticed several items misplaced, and the kitchen window had been broken. Walking further into his home, the homeowner found the intruder standing in his living room during a physical struggle. The suspect, Okay, now we got to follow me here. The suspect held the victim down and gouged his eye with a pitchfork. The homeowner, the victim, broke free and ran to his bedroom where he grabbed a firearm. The intruder followed him and then tried to wrestle a gun away. The 61-year-old victim's wife witnessed the entrapment and tried to pull the suspect off her husband. The 71-year-old homeowner tried to shoot the attacker. The gun jammed. He then found a samurai sword and stabbed the intruder. That's when the burglar ran from the home to a nearby residence and was detained. Seattle Fire treated the homeowner at the scene for injuries to his face and torso. The criminal was taken to a hospital for what they called non-life-threatening stab wounds. He was later arrested for burglary. John, or Paul, I think we found the rest of your drug deal.
Yeah, quite likely. My first thought on this one is please, unless you're trying to get to your children, there are some extenuating circumstances. I'm going to say go ahead and do it. But, excuse me, 90% of the time, if there's somebody in your house, let the police clear the house. Please don't try to do it on your own, and get training now if you think that you may at some point in the future have to. John, what do you think?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm not sure which I'd rather be armed with, a sword or a pitchfork. The advantage I would see to a pitchfork is you could hold the person, even if they were swinging at you, you could push the pitchfork out there and it'd be more of a defensive tool. But this guy, his eye was gouged with the pitchfork, so you figure he's like one-eyed already. I mean, good on him for fighting back the way he did.
Oh, yeah. And effectively.
And I think he's fighting for not only himself. I don't think he's fighting for his possessions, Paul. He's fighting for his life and his wife's.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's that. The thing that comes to mind as I listen to the story, the very first thing is, I sincerely hope that was a brand new pitchfork, because the residual infections that are going to come from whatever was tossed with that pitchfork prior to, that's just I'd rather be shot.
There's
Good point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there, speaking as somebody that grew up in farming, I'm right there with you, Amanda. There's unspeakable stuff that goes on to pitchforks. I'll go ahead and take this last one. We're going to Tel Aviv, Israel now. A terrorist in a car had rammed at least 7 people and then started stabbing pedestrians with a sharp object. A civilian who witnessed the attack was armed and shot the attacker. Closed circuit TV footage, CCTV footage showed pedestrians and cafe customers running for cover as a pickup truck hit a bus stop. The driver then crawls out the window and runs toward a man standing near the cafe. It showed him stab the man several times. He then chases other people on the pavement, speaking of the bad man. A second video showed a man wearing a motorcycle helmet shoot the attacker several times. 3 victims were in serious condition, 2 in moderate condition, and 2 in mild condition. Just like terrorists, red flag laws to take guns away from those who are a threat to themselves or others will always find a way to carry out their evil deeds. If they're looking to harm themselves, they can use other means. If they want to harm others, they can use cars or other means to injure or kill others. Rob, you're up first, man, in show notes. What do you think?
Yeah, a man driving a car, I believe, killed 8 people in Texas a few weeks ago. John?
I was going to say that given that most Israelis, male and female, have served in the IDF, I could see a good case being made for loosening up their carry laws. These are people that have already gone through military training, have shown that they're solid citizens, and can be trusted to carry a gun and protect other people. I mean, how many pictures have we always seen of some cute girl with an M16 over her shoulder who obviously is an IDF soldier on leave? You see it all the time. Because I don't think they're allowed to leave base without it.
My understanding of Israeli carry laws is it's very similar to what New York and New Jersey and Hawaii were before Bruin.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Evil is evil. That's the part that the anti-gun folks just don't get. That they will find a way.
Yes. Humans are a very ingenuity. They have great ingenuity. Let me get a comment in here. If you think that taking away guns will lower violence, then explain the violence in prisons. If you think guns will magically kill, I've heard of stories where people in prison get guns. You're not going to ever totally eliminate guns from the planet. It just won't happen.
We're not talking about how they got those guns in there.
No, we're not. No, we're not. Prison pocket. Sorry. Let's see here. Let's jump to our final break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what each of us have been doing with media, and we'll shut the show down. We'll get to that right after our final break. We're going to hear from JPFO right back right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. JPFO.org.
All right, we are back. This is the final segment of the Polite Society podcast presented by the Second Amendment Foundation. Rob, you've been back for just almost a week since you were underwater. I know you have been putting some stuff up on your blog, man. What's up?
I heard about a school resource officer in Ohio. Attention, Amanda. He spoke up at a school board meeting. And what this SRO said, I think, speaks for most of us. He said he'd give his life to defend our kids. Many of us feel that way about our family. Some of us feel that way about our community. But this officer said something more. He said he didn't want to waste his life so that the school board could virtue signal by having him there while at the same time disarming school staff. I think a lot of school SROs and safety teams feel that same way. That's called Spending Your Life to Save School Children. It's at slowfacts.wordpress.com. My articles are picked up at Clash Daily. John, what's new on your blog, No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money?
Well, in addition to my annual post of the Declaration of Independence and the Mecklenburg Declaration and Resolves, I've run them every year since I started, I have a few posts up. First, I suggested the NRA needed its own Independence Day where they declared independence from Bill Brewer. They have many good 2A lawyers who could handle their cases, so it made no sense to me to have him handle their new challenge to the pistol brace ban. He literally has no 2A experience. Brewer sucks up NRA revenues in his own pocket and then doesn't even win. I also learned that the Allies had a sixth beach planned for the D-Day landings, and it was called Band Beach. This was to neutralize some German shore batteries that could have threatened the landings. Eventually, they went with an aerial and naval bombardment instead. My point is that you still learn something new about an event that happened decades earlier. So, history... You still learn new history all the time. That and more is at onlygunsandmoney.com.
All right, Amanda, plug your radio show, and is there anything else you wanna promote or talk about tonight?
No, I'll just stick with my radio show. That it's just the same old boring, right? Sunday nights from 5 to 7 p.m. You can listen to it live then through the website, or if you're in terrestrial radio land somewhere on the West Coast, that's where primarily I'm at. I'm on Salem Radio Network, and then it is podcast. So I on the Target Radio, and it's with Rob and I. Not that Rob.
The better Rob.
The fuzzy Rob.
All right. Okay. On my end, I want to encourage everybody, do keep tuning in. Same bat time, same bat channel the rest of the week. Tuesday through Saturday is The Bullet, 7 p.m. Central Time. Again, the only time zone that matters. And we will continue to give you the news of the day. We did make a format change for the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday shows. It's just me, myself, and I. And then Saturday, Fridays, I still do alternate between Legal Friday and Trading Friday. And Saturday is always the big week in review show. And I bring people in to help me discuss the events of the week. Do please continue to come join us. And let me see here. Before we take off. Okay. I get two comments I want to get in here before we leave. First one, if you think that taking away guns will lower violence, then explain violence in the prisons. Yeah, we touched on that a little bit ago. And CNT also, Coop says, I just got back to my laptop and noticed Paul was clean shaven. What the beep? So, first time since I was 16 years old, I do not have any vestige of a beard, goatee, or mustache. And as I said previously, that's primarily to help with snorkeling. And we'll get into more of that later. And this time an appropriate use of Vaseline, but we'll leave that there.
Yeah.
That does wrap up another episode of the Second Amendment Foundation's Polite Society podcast. So for Dana, John, Susan, Amanda, Robin, Charlie, Carrie Ann, and Rob.
Until next time,
stay safe.
And be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.
All right, that's the end of the recording. If your children are in here, I'm going to get a couple of comments up as we go on the way. If your children are watching with you, shoo them away for a few minutes. Mute the broadcast, whatever you got to do. But let me 3, 2, 1 comment incoming. Comments incoming. Jesus wins. Bird of Michigan says divers do it deeper. And CNT Designs and Arms says there are non-naughty uses for Vaseline. And again, Jesus wins. Bird of Michigan. Never dive alone. So. That is good. I'm going to go ahead and shut the streams down. Thank you, everybody, for commenting. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Podcast listeners, thank you for listening. And we'll see you all tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central Time. Thanks again.